The show that tickles the armpit of tedium with the feather duster of interestingness. Tonight, we're taking a lingering look at love. My guests are the lovely Josh Widdicombe, that love machine Tony Hawks, the best beloved Aisling Bea, complete lovey Alan Davies. So, let's hear their love calls. Josh goes.
Oh, is that my buzzer?
Yes. Oh, you could give another love call if you want.
Well, I'm going to have to get my phone out. What am I wearing?
Love is all I think goes.
Love and marriage.
Oh, Frank Sinatra. Tony goes.
Let there be love.
Oh, yes. And Alan goes.
I like it. I like the way you run your fingers through my hair.
It wouldn't be possible to run one's fingers through your hair without there being some awful rending noise. Yes. I ought to tell you, though, because it's the L series, there is the likelihood of one question being lavatorial, and if it is, you can spend a penny. Very good. And if you correctly spend your penny when I ask the question, you get extra points. It's that simple. Right, to get you in the mood, here are some foods for you to try. You should have some on your little prop tables.
Oh.
You've got chocolates there, Josh. You've got a potato, Alan. What have you got then?
Well, I don't.
Champagne.
It looks like champagne.
Or
It could be anything.
probably carbon.
You could have had a wee in here earlier for all I know.
You wouldn't want it to fizz, though, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
Is your
Finger on top.
Yes, it is.
I hope it's fresh. I think it's fresh and edible if you want to eat it.
Well, I hope it's fresh
You
as
could
well.
drop it in the champagne. It's quite delicious.
Oh,
champagne.
God, I love...
I'm allergic to champagne, literally.
Are you?
Yeah, I can't drink it.
Oh, darling,
Gives
it
me
must be
asthma.
simply terrible for you.
Christopher Hitchens rather wonderfully said the four most overrated things in the world are lobster, champagne, anal sex and picnics.
What a night that would have been.
Come on, they're all daytime.
Anyway, so you by all means eat yours, but what do you think they have to do with our theme? Chocolate?
Sexy foods.
Yeah.
Aphrodisiac.
Aphrodisiacs. They're considered to be aphrodisiacs. Yeah. Oysters have long been considered it. Potato?
Yes, Alan, 1,000 times yes.
You can go on a date, of course, with 2 potatoes and a carrot and lay them out on the desk or the table in a very erotic way and tantalise people.
That's true. 2 potatoes and a carrot.
Are you single, Tony, or are you...
At what point in the date do you pull out the potato?
Well, the desk. I admit that the desk on the date, the date's going badly wrong.
Well, do have a piece of chocolate, do sip your champagne, and do by all means,
I mean...
have your oyster.
I do love oysters, but one time I did get poisoning on Valentine's Day.
On Valentine's Day? Oh, eating your potato raw.
Is that allowed?
Oh. Okay, here she goes, oyster down. Oh.
Bigger than I'm used to.
Hey.
Oh.
How is it?
Oh, very nice.
I'm definitely going to take this episode, I can tell you that.
Try your chocolate, I think.
Oh, they're very nice.
You might have rose petals or violets.
Are you all right, Alan?
I feel horny.
Look out, Josh.
It's worked. Bloody hell, 2 bites.
Well, the reason that potatoes were considered to be aphrodisiac at one point in history, this may be something Ashley knows, is that when they were introduced to Ireland as a major crop, the population of Ireland increased a huge amount. But it was simply because there was less starvation than there had been before. Though, as we know, there was then the terrible potato blight and the population reduced.
You have to bring it up.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. It was a bad moment in Irish history.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm nearly over it.
There's still more guilt to be got out of it from us.
Carbs are the last thing you'd want before sex.
I don't make you feel heavy, wouldn't you think?
Yeah. Depends how long you want to go on for, John. Just slow release. Porridge.
Slow release.
I didn't mean it like that, Stephen. I'm going to have a chocolate and stop lowering the tone, I think.
The fact is, if you go online, not that this is the most authoritative way of finding out, but almost any food that you put next to the word aphrodisiac in a search field will return a result of some kind. There seems to be no food in history that hasn't been regarded at some time as aphrodisiac. There's a wonderful book called Venus in the Kitchen by Norman Douglas, which includes such things as almond soup and sow's vulva and trussed crane, all kinds of extraordinary dishes, most of which were classical.
Can we go back to the second one?
Sow's vulva. It begins with the wonderful words, "Take that part of the pig," which you ask your butcher, I assume, to cut.
Can you imagine going into the butcher? Hiya, can I get a pound of mince and some sow's vulva? Midnight, I think he's going to propose.
Someone usually comes in on a Thursday. I'm fresh out.
If you're making someone eat that, they don't want to have sex with you.
Well, I agree. It's pretty much enforced, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other vulvas?
Very good point.
It's the sow's vulva that's a good
It seems
tasty
to be,
vulva.
yeah.
Do any other animals have a vulva?
Well, all mammals, I would hope.
Do they?
Well, not all mammals, not egg-laying mammals, but just
No.
about any other kind. Wouldn't
they?
I don't really know what a vulva is, to be honest.
It's a Swedish car, Steve.
No, it's a Swedish car. It's a Swedish car that's due for a service.
But it's all nonsense, isn't it? I mean,
No, they exist.
You mean aphrodisiacs?
aphrodisiacs, I think it's all a myth, isn't it? It's all nonsense.
It seems to be. I don't think there's any way of proving it. It's so hard to.
If I understand correctly, it's about the brain, sex.
Yeah.
The limbic lobe in the brain sends a message to your pelvic area.
Yeah.
Sometimes by carrier pigeon. And these foods, they don't affect that part of the brain.
You're quite the sexy talker, though, aren't you?
Is this your opening line before you take out the potatoes and carrots?
I'm not giving any trade secrets away here tonight.
So you say, Daphne, my limbic system is sending me. Yeah, I think most people would agree that a lack of inhibition hurries one toward the bedroom, and alcohol, naturally, is something that would...
But it doesn't enhance the performance.
As Shakespeare makes that very point through the Portrait of Macbeth, doesn't it?
Does he? I don't care.
It increases the desire, but it mars the performance.
Yes.
The fact is, there is no proof that, as Tony rightly said, that except possibly the alcohol as a disinhibitor. Galen, the Roman doctor, thought that any food that produced flatulence was in some way aphrodisiac. This was believed until the 18th century. We would have thought the opposite. In Elizabethan times, stewed prunes were so highly regarded as aphrodisiacs they were served for free in brothels. You get them to get you up there. And beans.
What, like outside Starbucks? Where they've got, like a taster plate?
Yes, that's right. Have your prunes. St. Jerome forbade beans because he thought that they would make nuns or women extremely horny.
Nuns or women?
They excited the genitals.
Who knows what's under there?
Yeah. They excited the genitals of women, he thought. Frog juice, putting a frog in a blender, is considered a Peruvian aphrodisiac.
They have blenders. Not now. I mean, I assume when they first thought of it, they didn't have blenders.
No, probably
so
not.
they
The
would have-
Incans were very, very advanced, though. But
Yeah. They probably used, they just...
pestle and mortar.
Yeah.
Does any of the active ingredients in Viagra occur naturally?
The old fake.
Oh, good question.
I like that. I like
You
that.
get them in
Whoa.
Greengrass.
That would be interesting to know.
Why? Are you worried about
what that potato's done to you.
I'm fine. How long does it last?
Well, there you are. Almost everything in the history of food has been reputed to be an aphrodisiac, even potatoes. What wouldn't you like to get on Valentine's Day?
Chlamydia.
Perfectly reasonable response.
Is that what VD stands for, Valentine's Day?
Never occurred to me. That's brilliant.
This is probably a few people have had this, which is the most tragic thing you can get on Valentine's Day is the card from your mum.
Oh, yes.
Or from my nan, in my case, you know. It's both, one from my mum, one from my nan, you know.
Oh, that's sweet, though.
But it's better than a one-way ticket to New Zealand.
That would be a hint too far.
I once got on I just split up with my girlfriend, and it was my birthday, and my family don't really do birthdays much, but her family did. So I received one birthday card, which was from my ex-girlfriend's mum.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've just realised how bleak that is.
Yeah.
I thought that was an amusing anecdote. Turns out it's actually the bleakest moment of my life.
We're all very sorry for you.
Can anyone tell me why on the Valentine's Day cards you're not supposed to admit that you've sent it? Because that's the most pointless thing, isn't it? You get a card from someone, you want to know who it is, so you can go round and sort them out, don't you?
Sort them out.
Take them to your office.
Take them to your office,
Show them
the desk,
Get the carrot out.
get the carrot and potato.
Begin the whole process.
Go via the greengrocer to pick up your vegetables.
You've had a window into your life, Tony. That's weird. The really high watermark of Valentine card sending was a 50-year period from 1840 to 1890 when Victorians sent each other Valentine's cards on Valentine's Day. But they didn't just send love letters. They sent what you might almost call hate mail, but they were known as vinegar valentines. And there's I don't know what that's basically sending them, you are bald and smelly because flies.
You're not very good at DIY.
You shouldn't have cut through that wire.
Not surprisingly, they're quite rare because people who receive them tended to throw them away. So people who collect cards value them very highly.
What did they expect to sort of get back? I mean, well, you know, they think this is really going to help this situation.
I'm afraid it's the same human instinct that is about trolling, you know. It's accused people of being drunk, ugly, overweight, stuck up, all the things that trollers accuse people of. Also, they accuse grocers of cheating their customers and things like that. And very often they didn't put stamps on, so that the recipient had to pay the stamp. Oh, I've got a lovely Valentine card, and then they open it, and it's a huge insult. I mean, it's very mean. But we do have, I'm glad to say, this is not really a vinegar, but it's a rather charming one. This is one with a moustache.
Ah.
And this is in York Museum, in the York Castle.
Not anymore, it isn't.
Well, yeah. Good point. It's from York Castle Museum, and it's got a moustache, and it says, with heartiest greetings and best hopes, that she'll soon get another. That's a moustache. With a man attached. So,
Bit of a jumper, this guy.
yeah, I mean, because sending locks of hair through the post as a sign of love is a very old thing, but to send a moustache is quite something, isn't it? And a little joke of, you know.
You probably know who it was who sent it because he'd be going around with no moustache on.
Yeah, exactly.
If you kidnapped a man with a moustache,
Yeah.
you know, then you'd send the moustache to show that you've got...
Oh, is it? That's true. It's kinder than sending an ear.
Recognise this moustache?
Salvador Dali's wife is like, no!
Well, that's what a vinegar valentine was. From love letters to l'amour. Who did Napoleon's ex go out with next?
Are we talking about Josephine?
Well, yes, we are, but not the Empress Josephine. Oddly enough, he seemed to have a predilection for Josephines. Well, he had two mistresses. One was called Josefina, one was called Josephine, neither of whom was the Empress Josephine. There they are. There was Josefina Grassini, who was a beautiful dancer, opera singer, opera dancer, they used to be called it, and Josephine Weimar, an actress. So they were both very beautiful.
She looks like she's doing the single ladies dance. Like she's, what?
She's showing how tall Napoleon is. That's what
I once was this high.
But these, as I say, were different Josephines. They were later ones. Just before the Battle of Waterloo, who was the British ambassador in Paris?
British ambassador.
I'll leave this one to you, Alan.
Before Napoleon escaped. Before
His
Napoleon
eyes
escaped.
broken.
It's actually, it's kind of easier than you think. He was the victor of Peninsula and he'd beaten Napoleon before, and he was about to beat him again.
Wellington,
It was the Duke of Wellington. Duke of Wellington himself. There's old Hooky on the right, and there's Napoleon on the left. And, yeah, Wellington really knew how to rub it in when he beat someone, as it were.
Did he go out with?
Yeah, he went out with both of these mistresses. He seduced both during his stay in Paris as ambassador in 1814 and 1815, just before Waterloo, before the escape of Napoleon. While Napoleon was in Elba, having abdicated, if you remember. Able was I ere I saw Elba. What's odd about that phrase?
It's a palindrome, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. It's a palindrome.
It's actually a palindrome, guys, so...
And Weimar was the only one who compared the two in bed, which is extremely unkind of her. She said, Monsieur le Duc était beaucoup plus fort, was a lot stronger in bed. Fort is fiercer, stronger, mightier. Yeah, better, basically.
Was there a Mrs. Wellington sort of back home who was a bit fed up about
The
it?
Duchess, yeah.
Yeah, she must have been, unimpressed, I'd say.
Well, he famously did have a lot of affairs.
There were so many potatoes around in those days. No doubt that they were up to it.
That's right. And after the war's ended, he was presented with Napoleon's sword, 3 paintings of him, and a painting of his sister, Pauline Borghese. There she is, that's Napoleon's sister there, with a nipple showing.
She's got something keeping her chin on as well.
Yes, keeping her mouth from falling open.
I think it's a mask. It's clearly some sort of a face mask. Like it's got a bit of elastic around the back.
Well, Napoleon had commissioned a statue of himself, 11 foot tall, basically twice the height of himself. And this was bought by the British government and given to Wellington along with the house they gave him. Do you remember what it's called? It's got a wonderful famous...
Number 1 London.
Number 1 London.
Oh,
Apsley
wow.
House. And it really works. If you get into a cab and say Number 1 London, the cab will go, oh, I've always wanted someone to say that. And they will take you there.
Is that supposed to be the sculpture of Napoleon?
That is it in the, I know, somewhat idealised to say the least, in the stairwell of Apsley House, as it's also called.
Where is number 1 London then?
It's a Hyde Park corner.
It's easier to spot in real life because there isn't a bloody great big picture.
Duke Wellington, Beef Wellington man.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's named after him. Yep, and the boots.
And the boots as
A
well.
lot of military figure had articles of clothing named after them, particularly for some reason the Crimean War. There was Lord Cardigan, who was in charge of the Light Brigade.
Balaclava.
The balaclava helmet, absolutely. And the
Jodhpur.
Jodhpur's a place, I think. But Raglan was also part
Dr.
of
Martin.
Raglan. The Raglan sleeve.
Lord Bobble Hat.
Colonel Scarf.
Old Jock Strap.
The Earl of Head and Shoulders.
Lieutenant Washing Machine.
Well, there were a lot, a few. So, good. The Duke of Wellington's conquests included Napoleon and no fewer than 2 of his exes. Who would bite their arm off to get their leg over?
Love is all around me.
Yes, Josh. You! Even if we hadn't got that one ready, you'd already revealed what a sad act you are, and we would have typed it in quickly.
It must be from the animal kingdom.
It is from the animal kingdom, and what type of animals usually have to suffer in order to give their seed? As it were?
Spiders are usually-
Spiders is the right answer.
Oh, yeah, look at
It's a
that.
particular kind of spider. There's the female on the left, and there's the male on the right.
That's a niche market there.
He's going to have a Napoleon complex, isn't he?
Have you seen that picture of Bernie Ecclestone and his ex-wife?
It's like that old
He's said to his mates have said, no, don't bother, she's too big for you. He's going, no, I can get her. You watch, she's no problem at all, mate. You know.
He won't let her wear heels on a night out, will he?
She is 100 times bigger, and if we see him close up, you might notice...
He's Tom Cruise.
It's quite hard to see, but the front 2, the left one is curled inwards a bit, but the right one is straight up, are actually penis legs. He has 8 legs like any spider, but the front 2 are penises. and are charged with...
I've got a couple of them, don't remember.
The old penis leg there.
They're called pedipalps, and the thing he does in order to get a better chance of shagging that enormous female is he actually spins some silk and ties it round one of his penis legs and pulls so that it basically pulls it off. So he actually tears it off.
If he pulls it off, there's no point in having sex with it.
No, there's one left.
Oh.
And it gives him a speed advantage. So he's much, much quicker, so he can scuttle after her. It always seems the most complicated life cycle, the oddest procedure, but it's honestly true. It's the male tent cobweb spider. So the males that do this are 44% faster than ones who've kept both their penis legs. But even then, when they get the female, which is their reward, the female then can suck them dry and discard them. Yeah. Which...
Oh, isn't that just the way?
Yes.
You deserve it, you old bastards.
Mum sends him a card.
Is the human equivalent of this?
Katie Price.
No.
The octopus has a penis arm, didn't we?
Yes, that's right. Completely
I
correct.
read this, the 8 legs of the octopus all function independently and they don't know what the other ones are doing. Isn't that weird?
Yep.
And the only thing in the world that an octopus sucker won't stick to is an octopus leg.
Which is so
Which is why they don't get all tangled up.
Yeah.
I know things about octopuses.
You do. Researchers tested the tent cobweb spider rather meanly by chasing them, some intact, some not, around the little running track to see how long they lasted. And the spiders with intact sex organs lasted 16 minutes on average, but the spiders that had snapped one off or snipped one off lasted up to 28 minutes. So it is a big advantage. Once you've mated, of course, you have to bring up the children. To that end, what are the advantages of having a goat as a nanny?
Let there be love.
I think it's because they've got hooves. And if you had a nanny that had hooves, they couldn't sneak up on you.
That's true. The fact is, nanny goats are called nanny goats for a dash good reason. In the days of foundlings who were left on church doors, if you left a baby on a church steps, it was a foundling, and it was therefore thrown on the mercy of the parish, and it had to be fed. And of course, there was no such thing as SMA or cow and gate or anything like that. The only way they could get milk was from a breast. So you had wet nurses, but you also had goats.
So
And goats were amazing.
They'd feed on the goat.
Yeah, they feed on the goat milk. Very good stuff. Straight from the teat. It is it's better than until 1870. Pasteurisation was invented by Pasteur, obviously. It was the healthiest way you could have it straight from the teat.
Was the goat okay with?
Not only okay.
I'm seeing Josh's little eyes light up and he's like, straight from the teeth.
Yeah.
Did you say goats were okay then?
Not only okay, you may have seen cows that are desperate to be milked and they queue up for the dairy in order to be milked. Well, goats the same if they're ready to give suck. So we have here a description.
What?
Well, you know, the phrase, Shakespearean again, Lady Macbeth. French doctor Alphonse Leroy described it in a foundling hospital in France. Each goat which comes to feed enters bleating and goes to hunt the infant which has been assigned to it. So there's a particular child that's been assigned to, pushes back the covering of the bed with its horns, like that, and straddles the crib to give suck to the infant.
Sounds like an accident waiting to happen. Goat soup on the...
Can you imagine trying to get insurance for that now in the NHS? So we just have this goat straddle a baby, and then the baby just sort of know to suck off the goat.
Imagine the Daily Mail all over that.
Whoa, maybe.
Straddles baby.
Why did they have? Why goats? Why not?
Well, it's a very good question. Cows are just a bit too big, I think, to go into a little... just go over the crib.
I don't want to pat on the head. 13 years.
Been waiting for that.
Yeah. You asked about goats, and some people thought into the 19th century that breast milk contained not only nutrition, but the character traits of whoever gave it. So if the mother was a loose woman and had given the baby out of wedlock, she wasn't to be trusted to give milk to her baby because she would be passing on her immorality to the child. This is how mad we once were.
Well, how do they know what the goat's been up to?
Well,
They were married goats.
it might have been an unmarried goat. You're absolutely right.
Dirty goat.
In 1816, there was a writer who compared different milks and wrote the definitive book called The Goat is the Best and Most Agreeable Wet Nurse. Others preferred donkeys, which are thought to have a better moral reputation.
They are very noble. They carried our Lord.
That's it, in Palm Sunday,
Mary,
well remembered.
yeah, and also
exactly.
Mary.
And then there was the syphilis outbreak in the 16th and 18th centuries.
Oh, then the party's over.
Yeah.
Dirty donkey.
And goat wet nurses were used there. And unfortunately, they were used very unkindly because...
What's he up to? Oh, OK, fair enough.
It's better be for the baby.
I think that's a different bloke that usually does it, according to that goat's face.
Hold a minute, that's not the grip I'm used to. Hello, that's a bit firm.
Do you know what I find mad about? I don't have kids, so maybe women in the audience will know. With that, when you're breastfeeding your child, if you're, say, in a supermarket or something like that, and someone else's baby cries, you leak like a spider sense.
Yes.
If someone, isn't that true? Any women have had?
Yeah, it
is.
There's a bloke up there going, yep. I always leak when I hear a baby crying. I don't even know why that's funny.
Not true though, it is, isn't it?
But if you have, you presumably expressed into a pot and given it to the babysitter. That's what happens, isn't it?
Why would the babysitter want some?
There was an ice cream.
It's a million.
There was an ice cream shop.
Shot
That would have
glasses.
been fine.
Wasn't there?
Have yourself anything in the fridge?
There was for a brief time an ice cream shop, wasn't there, here in London, which sold
Breast milk ice
human
cream.
breast milk ice
Oh,
cream.
you say a very brief time because it's the worst business plan of all time.
Yes, you're right. You try it once, I think, like incest or country dancing. Wish that were my own.
You've not been to Devon, Stephen.
I come from Norfolk, for God's sake. No, the sad thing about the syphilis outbreaks of the 16th and 18th century is that it was believed then, and indeed all the way up to the 19th century, that one of the cures for syphilis, a kill-all cure really, was mercury, which is poisonous, as I'm sure you know. And they decided a good delivery system for babies that were born syphilitic was to make them suckle on the milk of goats that had been fed mercury. A lot of goats died that way, so unkind.
Did the babies die?
Probably. It probably didn't help them. I mean, it's not good for the brain at all when you're growing brain.
It's good for thermometers.
It's very good for thermometers, I agree. These days, thermometers are very little ear click things and everything. They've really moved on, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Yeah, just go in the ear, ping, like that. It's so amazing.
Or you could stick a thing under the armpit.
Or,
But more difficult.
more fun. Under the tongue.
Oh, under the tongue. Under the tongue.
What were you thinking?
More difficult, though, for you to, like, fake your temperature to get off school,
I
though.
know, you used to stir coffee with it and things like that. Yeah.
You were having coffee as a schoolboy.
University.
Mother, I'm not ready for primary school. I'll just have this latte and stay
Oh, lorks. Anyway, now to bundles of love. Why did the Puritans want lusty young men to get into the sack? That picture tells the story.
Let there be love.
I think that it's to do with them not having sex
Yes.
early on.
You're right.
Because they were Puritans and they
Yes.
thought sex was evil or you shouldn't do it, certainly until you were married or anything like that.
Completely correct.
So they had a thing called bundling,
You're absolutely
where they
right.
put them into sacks.
That's right.
Or something, was it?
That's right. So there was getting the young man into the sack in that literal sense. You put the man in a sack and he could sleep next to his intended, or he could have a board between them like that.
I mean, what kind of man can't get over that?
You've got the old handheld drill under the covers.
He's actually looking at that and saying, this is more over my side.
Yeah.
Does the duvet go under the...
It does. You basically fit this wooden thing on once you've made the bed.
Are you sure they haven't just misread the instructions to like
The IKEA bundling kit.
The York
on a bed.
Why were they sleeping together before marriage?
Well, I think that they did want them to get used to each other conversationally.
Yes, that's right.
Well, genuinely, that was it.
Yeah, I believe that's the idea. So that was bundling. It was an American and Dutch tradition which Americans took to, particularly in Pennsylvania, where the Dutch people went. Teenagers in sacks has a certain logic, but frogs in underpants, what would you do that for?
If you run out of carrots.
It sounds like a new game show on Channel 5, Frogs in Underpants.
It does, doesn't it?
That frog is smiling because of what that bloke's doing with his right hand.
Well, actually, putting frogs in their own underpants, putting underpants on frogs is actually where we're tending.
Is it something the French do to make them more appetising?
Slap a thumb on it.
Pants. It was actually an Italian priest who did this. He was quite a clever fellow.
Oh, I don't think he was.
He had a lot of time on his hands, though, didn't he?
Well, yes. Up until the 18th century, they didn't know what sperm was for. And why would they? It doesn't seem so obvious to us. And so, like all good scientists, this particular fellow, who was an Italian
put a
called...
frog in some underpants.
Yeah, he was called Lazzaro Spallanzani.
It's the obvious next step.
So Spallanzani, yeah, what it is, when you think about it, he knew that frogs fertilise their eggs outside the female's body. So it's a lot simpler than doing it to an animal that actually shagged, you know, like
Don't
we
do
do.
that with your chair.
Sorry. Do get spotted. It was an easy way of testing because the females lay the eggs and the males come along and the eggs are fertilised. So he thought, if I cover these in little taffeta pans, which you put on the frogs then dried, you know, and the eggs did not fertilise. So he was able to make the correct assumption that the semen was necessary for fertilising eggs. And he extrapolated that into other animals. But he didn't just work on frog sperm, so I would say he was clever. Spallanzani. He also was one of the first people to carry out artificial insemination on a spaniel. First person to suggest that bats use sound to navigate in the dark. He experimented on snail regeneration. This was slightly less kind. He had this idea, I think it was known that snails could regenerate their heads, so he took quite a lot of them, 423, cut all their heads off.
Did you say he was a priest?
Yes.
He wasn't doing many sermons.
No, he was. Quite a lot of people
Very
were
small
priests.
parish.
So 423 snails, of which a fifth supposedly grew their heads back, which is not a lot, but it would be a lot more than if he'd done it to humans. He also, this is a very extraordinary experiment, he tested the power of gastric juices by putting food in a sort of cheesecloth bag, which he tied up, and then swallowed and lowered into his tummy on a string, and then brought it up to see how much it had been... yeah, but how else would you do it?
It sounds like one of those people you just would not want to get stuck with at a dinner party.
Probably true.
Oh, yeah, good, yeah.
What, when he's getting out his cheesecloth for the dinner?
Excuse me.
Maybe something more unpleasant still. What horror was first shown in the film Psycho?
Was it someone in the shower?
I mean, she's in the shower, but the film shot took 30 days to film, which is very short by any Hollywood standards, and 7 of those days were devoted to the shower scene. Janet Leigh...
He actually got it in the first day, but...
Let there be love.
Yes, you're right.
There was a toilet in the shower scene.
Yes. Is that it? Yeah. It's not just that there is one, it's the first time one had been seen flushed with the water going round. It spirals down the lavatory. The film is black and white. There's the murderer, we won't say who they or he or she is, and it's considered one a masterpiece now, particularly the Bernard Herrmann score, which...
Didn't they make a shot-for-shot remake of
They did, what a disastrous idea.
Why would you...
Colour.
Oh, colour.
It was in colour.
There's a whole generation of people who, if they're channel surfing and they see something in black and white, will never stop to look at it, which is extraordinary given that, you know, probably most of the best films...
Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
Probably most of the best films ever made are in black and white. It just seems so
Not
extraordinarily
even
sad.
Broadway Danny Rose.
I know. Go. Elephant Man.
Why did you point at me when you said Elephant Man? Good to have you on the show, John.
That was purely accidental. Anyway. Psycho was the first film to feature a flushing lavatory. From flushing to blushing. Why did half the brides in London go to prison? Here's odd.
Because it's your... Oh,
Love and marriage.
because women like a bad boy.
Well, that is a syndrome, of course. You're absolutely right. There are women who fall into common...
Let there be love.
They used to have weddings sometimes in prisons.
They did. And there was a good reason for that. We're going back
150 years.
probably even more than that. You were talking really the 18th century because there was a law brought in to stop it happening. But essentially there were certain kinds of prisons. Obviously there were prisons where people were sent for committing crimes. But there were you were in prison really commonly. Charles Dickens' father is an example. For debt, exactly. And the most famous debtors' prisons were, well, one was the Marshalsea, which is where Little Dorrit is set, and Charles Dickens' father was. And the other was called the Fleet Prison. And the Fleet Prison was the most popular for this. And there's a picture of it. It had a yard, and people were more or less free.
I went a bit far with that wall, don't you think? Higher than that. Oh, I've seen them jump. They can jump. They can make ladders out of shoes. I've seen them. Higher.
Alan, it's because they kept losing their ball over the wall.
They can get out the top window.
Quite a lot of the people who got into debt were priests, and they didn't get defrocked for it. It wasn't a defrockable offence, so they didn't get cast out of the church. So they retained their ability, their licence to marry. So if you wanted to get married in a hurry, you went to an indebted priest, and he wouldn't charge that much, and it would go against his debt, the debt that he had to pay to get out of prison. So it was all worked very nicely.
So if you're in debt, how do you get out of prison?
Your family or someone eventually raises the money. Oh. So you're basically kept as a kind of hostage. It's a miserable business.
I mean, it doesn't look that miserable.
Yeah, this looks like an advert for come to prison.
You were pretty much allowed to mingle. Your children, brothers, sisters, a visiting day was available. If you read Little Dorrit, you'll see that Little Dorrit's father was kind of the king of the Marshalsea. He had the best rooms, and he was treated as if he was a great gentleman.
That would be worth. Think how much that property would be worth in London now.
Oh, goodness me.
The wall alone.
Yeah.
You've got outside space. It's lovely.
They don't get tennis rackets in prisons these days, do they? Look, they're all out playing tennis. They don't go to the warder and just say, I'm just off for a game of tennis.
No, that's true.
And this person in the bottom left, are they smoking a crack pipe?
Yeah. It does look a bit like that. Fleet weddings were brought to an end by 1753 by Lord Hardwicke, his Marriage Act. So after that, most people who wanted an irregular marriage, as it was called, went to... Where did they have to go to get married in a hurry?
Gretna Green.
Gretna Green is the right answer, the nearest they could get to. Just over the Scottish border, where law is different. The effect of the Act was that it got rid of this idea of a common law marriage. So for 250 years, there's been no such thing as a common law marriage. Although over 60% of people asked if there is such a thing as a common law marriage believe there is, but it has no basis in law at all, no standing.
Right.
Yeah. Now, it's time to clear the blockage of received wisdom with the plunger of general ignorance. So fingers on buzzers, please. What should a Welshman wear on his hat on St. David's Day?
Let there be love.
Yes.
Daffodil.
Well, if it's not, it's got to be a leek, right? It's got to be a leek. What about cheese on toast? Is it going to be
A Welsh rabbit. A Welsh rabbit. We've been rather unfair there, of course, because Welsh people do wear leeks these days in their heads, but we're going all the way back to the original battle they fought, where supposedly they wore leeks in order to distinguish themselves. You can see if that's the Royal Welsh Regiment or whatever, with what looked more like...
I've never seen a queen so happy.
She really does look thrilled.
What's that bloke said to her about his hat? She loves
Something
it.
about it.
They've all got leeks on their hats.
She's probably saying she's probably saying they don't know that they're actually spring onions. Because they look a lot more like spring onions. Well, there's a whole issue about whether or not there were leeks. And Alan Davidson, close name, author of the Oxford Dictionary of Food, he claims that leeks, as we know them, didn't arrive in Britain for much longer after the Battle of Heathfield, where the Welsh who beat the Saxons there believed that they first wore leeks to identify themselves. In Anglo-Saxon, the suffix liek meant any member of the onion family. So enliek was an onion and garliek was garlic. So they might have sported something like garlic, which is slightly more light and practical than certainly a fully grown leek. The Museum of Wales thinks that actual leeks may have been brought over by the Romans. So there's dispute, really, to be honest. We just wanted to take points away from you. Anyway, it's possible that the national emblem of Wales should really be a garlic. There's a layer of the atmosphere which protects us from ultraviolet radiation. What's it made of? Hint, it has a hole in it.
Love and marriage.
Ozone.
Oh!
No. What are the odds?
What are the odds? Because it is called the ozone layer, but it is neither a layer nor made primarily of ozone, which is very mean of scientists to do that to us. It wouldn't have
Named
never
after the
existed.
Irish family, the Zones or the Ozone.
The ozone. The ozones have moved in next door. It's only 15 parts per million ozone. Do you know what the chemical formula for ozone is?
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you.
It's O3. Oh, yes, it's a pale blue form of oxygen with a very pungent smell. At 0 degrees Celsius and normal atmospheric pressure, all the ozone in the sky would cover the Earth to a depth of just 3 millimetres. Under the same conditions, the rest of the air would make a layer 5 miles thick. That's how rare it is. And finally, here's one for surf lovers. Where could you find the biggest waves in the world? Whitcomb Fair.
Hawaii.
Oh, dear, oh dear.
Newquay.
So, where?
The Indian Ocean?
No, well, possibly, yeah.
Malibu.
Well,
I was just on a hat trick.
yeah. There is good surfing to be had there on the Californian coast, but let's forget coasts. Let's forget Australian coasts, any other coast.
Is it going to be
Is it going to be a different type of wave?
It is, no, it's a seawater wave, but it's underwater. The biggest waves are actually subsurface waves. It was satellites that showed us. We didn't know until satellite photography.
And there are lots of drowned surfers.
Well, they'll be very hard to surf because they really go incredibly slow. They crawl along a few centimetres a second, so a few metres an hour, I think. And a tsunami, on the other hand, which is obviously a gigantic wave, is Japanese for harbour wave, because we say tidal wave, but a tidal wave isn't correct, because it isn't tidal. Tsunamis result from earthquakes, landslides and volcanoes, as we probably know. In the open ocean, the waves are about only 300 millimetres high, but with a very long wavelength, sometimes hundreds of kilometres apart. As they approach land, the sea gets shallower, and that's what pushes them up.
How fast is a tsunami? Because he is not going to...
He's not going to make it, I'm afraid. No, he's not.
Especially with 3 sharks on their way.
What with him not having any feet?
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, before it gets any sicker, the world's biggest waves are underwater. And so, finally, to the scores, which, if you're lucky, will be love all. Well, they aren't. Oh. They're fascinating, though. He did run into the wall several times. The tousle, toe-headed deer from Devon. Minus 36 points in 4th place is Josh Widdicombe. Reed is our 3rd placer on minus 7, Alan Davies. Ashling just ahead on minus 6. On plus 7, it's Tony Hawks. Good night from Ashling, Tony, Josh, Alan and me. And I leave you with the last words of English essayist Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. It's all been very interesting. Good night.